Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the news behind the news of Ralph Kintav on Mix 94.7 FM. I hope that you guys have been having a blessed day so far, and thank you for tuning in to today's program. This afternoon, I have here with me Dr. Anders Linda Richardson, a woman with many commas, because I can say you're a court interpreter, you're a member of the Order of the Orange Nassau, that's how you pronounce it?
Yeah, Nassau, yeah.
Okay, Nassau.
Knighted by, yeah.
Entrepreneur, former Minister of Education, and so many other stuff that we will start to get into, at least for today. And I already know that you will have to be back on the show. So thank you for accepting the invitation.
Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for being so patient, because it's quite a while. I think as you were starting this program, you invited me.
Yes.
Yes.
But I believe in consistency.
Yeah,
Consistency yields results.
Right.
So even as I shared with you off air before you came in, I found an interesting video of you making a presentation at the University of West Indies from about 12 years ago, which was in 2009, so 13 years ago. As you're speaking about language policy and language on St. Martin, I think that is very interesting, because we now see that conversation become at the forefront, become very popular on the island, and for years you've been consistent with that.
Yeah, yes.
So I'd like to first start off with what led you to that point in terms of if you can tell us a bit about I know that you studied to be an interpreter and studied translations in Belgium.
Yeah.
So if you could tell us about that experience, why did you decide to do it, and so forth?
Okay, so you've taken me straight back to a lot of decades. But I wanted to become a translator, actually, not so much an interpreter. And because I thought there were two things. I had a teacher, I had a translator, and I thought that was a way to just me, myself and I, and dictionaries and paperwork, and don't have to deal with any rude children and so forth. So that was one of the first things. I didn't really think at that time about an interpreter. But I had as a teacher, though, I had a role model, my godmother, who is still alive, and she's in Aruba. She follows everything, what I'm doing. I had liked the fact that when she returned from studying in Holland, how she would be speaking her Dutch and how she'd be looking and so on. And as a matter of fact, she was not even my godmother. I asked her to be my godmother. I asked my mother if it was okay. I would ask her to be my godmother. And so she remained forever my role model. Great teacher, very good, helped me a lot in life, and a lot of other kids in Aruba. When I finally decided I want to be a translator, at the time the study for translating and interpreting was not in Holland available. So I was the first one that the Dutch Antillean government sent out with a scholarship to Belgium to study in Belgium. That in itself was quite an experience. The Belgian had just been kicked out. I had just left Congo. So every black person they saw, they thought maybe it was Congolese. And so I was really, looked at a lot. It is even sometimes so crazy that when you walk into this big school, the students will go outside. So I would walk in as if they put a red carpet for me, royal entrance. And I had quite some experiences there. But there has been a professor who really believes in me and who was encouraging me a lot to continue on and do besides and translating, also interpreting. And why I did that? Because I was very strong in my languages. I was strong in Spanish at the time, in the Dutch and the English language. And I thought, well, that would be an easy study for me to do, right? So Professor Loze, he's passed on now, he too became a sort of a mentor, but not only mentor, he became also like a foster father. So his family in the weekend would invite me to spend some weekends with them, and so I became their foster child, so to speak, and they're my foster parents. I know a lot of people will jump when they see me walking with them anywhere, and I will call them Mama and Papa, and people will want to know, these two people get this black child, you know what I mean? So in any case, but I owe him a lot. He's really encouraged me a lot to go ahead and become an interpreter. He invited me to the European Union, introduced me to the powers that be. I've seen some top interpreters do some great stuff. At the time, they did not train you to be an interpreter for the court. they train to be an interpreter to be able to work in the European Union, and it's kind of tough. You had to be reading all kind of newspapers in different languages every day to be very much aware and up to date with what is going on in the world. As a student, when I was finishing up, I had some very interesting gigs as an interpreter, especially for Spanish, because that would it was sometimes shocking to see what I would get paid maybe for one day interpreting is what I would get as a whole month scholarship money.
Well,
that kind of stuff. But in finalizing my studies in Antwerp, in Belgium, I was doing a study about papiamento, the origin of papiamento. Actually, in linguistic terms, that would be the etymology of papiamento. And for that, I had to be supervised by a professor in Amsterdam. And that was Professor Reumer, who is a brother of one of the former governors also. And so under his guidance, I started to get more and more interest in the studies of linguistics, the studies of Creole languages, the study of social linguistics. What does a language mean in a society? How does it operate? And even the study of psycholinguistics, what happens in the head, and so forth. So when I finished in Belgium, rather than going on to the European Union, maybe to work there, I just became very much concerned and involved with language, how that operates in a society, and especially at the time also what the teaching of Dutch in our islands, and when I say our islands at the time, the islands where Papiamento was the mother tongue of most of the people, Curaçao, Aruba, and Bonaire, and English of the Windward Islands. So I became very much aware that I think we are doing something wrong with the teaching of our children in a language that is so foreign to them. So I kept delving more and more in that. I gave several presentations all over the world, as a matter of fact, from Stockholm to Africa, so to speak. And when I finished my studies, because then I went to Amsterdam to do general linguistics, specialization in Creole languages, social linguistics. How do these languages that they call Creole languages, how do they function in their society with above that, the language of the former colonizer? And so, yeah, I was a very, very strong advocate of teaching a child in the mother tongue, and that is in the tongue that the child dreams in, the language that the child speaks to the mother to, and the language that the child prays in. And when I came doing some research here in St. Martin on that, I really thought, no, the Dutch is a dead language in this country, and so it is not fair to be teaching children in a language that is totally alien to them. Besides that, a language is not a language in itself. A language is linked to culture. It's linked to how people live. And so coming back here and doing some research, as your intern is doing here also, coming back and observing, I knew that we were going down the wrong path with the manner in which we were handling both the language of the people as well as the Dutch language, because there's nothing wrong in teaching the children Dutch, but you have to teach it to them from their own language. I was here at one point, and I had a niece, one of my favorite nieces, would spend the weekend with me, and she was going to the Milton Peters College, and she was reading. She and I were readers, Sometimes she spent time with me. Both of us, we hardly talking. We both reading books. I always love to read books, and she too. And when she finished the book, and she had to read the book in Dutch for her school, I would tell her, "Tell me what is in the book. Tell me what you read," and she would stammer and stutter in the Dutch language. And then I would say, well, okay, tell it to me in English. And then she would fluently say exactly what she read in the book. And that kind of test I've done over and over again with children in Curaçao, with children in Bonaire, and with children in the Windward Islands, that, hey, we are really doing something wrong, because if the child understands what it is that they're reading, but they cannot reproduce it in the language that they read it in, then we have a serious problem. Another problem is also that the kids were learning another language from a foreign language. So you're learning Spanish, for example, from Dutch.
Yes.
In a country where Spanish and Dutch is being heard all the time. So it's really, really not right.
I could imagine how was it like in doing your research, but also returning, because did you find that the society was open enough to receive that idea, but also
well, I had my blows. It's interesting. I had my blows. What happened is I was writing to the different governments that I want to come back to the islands when I finished my study, when I got my doctorate on this title. And in the meantime, I had published several papers, and nobody was reacting. Nobody was, which is still happening today. A lot of young people write and they want to know, and so forth and so on. Nobody reacts, even if whether the right government or the right in the private sector, people don't react. So you don't know how to really plan your life properly, to speak. Engage and so forth and so on. So at one point, I got a call from St. Martin, the education department of St. Martin. I think at that time it wasn't St. Martin called me first, no. The Minister of Education, Mr. Jacques Veres, called me from Curaçao. And he said that they were organizing a teachers' conference in St. Martin on bilingualism in St. Martin, and they wanted me to be the keynote speaker. And I said, sure, no problem. Just send my return ticket and blah, blah, blah. I think I told this first to someone in St. Martin, and then the minister himself called me. The minister himself called me, who I didn't know before. And I didn't know that he was following everything I was doing. He was putting his hand on my work. And he was also very interested to make a change with this language issue in the islands. I didn't know the gentleman. So he called me and he said, I understand that you want me to send a return ticket, but I'm not going to let you return. You need to come home, and you need to, work with in the Linguistic Institute that you have to set up for the Windward Islands.
Wow.
So, no, you're not going to go back. As a matter of fact, I was living in Spain. By then, I was living in Spain, translating, doing different things in Spain, teaching English to Spanish speakers, or teaching Spanish to English speakers, translating films and doing different things. So when he called, eventually I returned, and the entrance was quite interesting, because at this teachers conference that was held at the time at the Methodist College, I said that even the title of the conference was ironic about being bilingualism. There is nobody here who's bilingual with Dutch and English. That's wrong. We are semi-lingual people. And what is semi-lingualism? Is that you speak a lot of languages, but you don't master none of them properly.
The jack of all trades.
The jack of all trades.
But in language.
So a lot of people felt very offended. And the other reason why some people felt offended is that because I said, do you realize that actually Dutch is a dead language in this country? It's not a living language. There are no newspapers in Dutch.
Yeah.
And this is in 1981 that I came back. Okay?
No radio programs.
No radio programs in Dutch. You don't have any cultural experiences that would support the development of proper language in Dutch for the children. So the Dutch is, who speaks, even the Dutch people speaking with you are speaking English. So it's a dead language in this country.
But it's used as a elite status.
It's used as an elite status to some extent. Yes. So, well, I almost got battled back out of St. Martin, and including by some of our own people. Interestingly, some of them who today are talking about English must be language of instruction, but some of them at that time thought it was nice to join the Dutch, to be upset with me, and try to make my life miserable. But after having spent some interesting years in Europe, and as I just told you, being maybe the only at the time black student at that school in Belgium.
Yeah.
Before, the other person who came after me, 2 years after me, is Cheryl Abega.
Okay.
Whom I give all my books to, and she will tell you that I opened the way for her, I have to having gone through quite some experiences in the Netherlands, and I at one point was also very radical. I was very much involved with the socialist movement, feminist movement, and name it. I was there.
Even as you mentioned, on your daughter shared this thing on Facebook about the things you did, how she looks up to you and some of your achievements, and it was quite radical of you. Perhaps I just based on how conservative society has been. I think you swore in wearing traditional wear, and you had in braids at that time.
Yes.
Which is
it's not now, eh? Yeah. This is then.
Yeah, exactly.
When people would not wear braids, and this is then. When I'm going to a Curacao where people would wear, to get sworn in, to wear, the black people that look like me would wear the nice hats and have the hair straightened and so forth, and permed.
Yeah.
And also I had on an African dress, and indeed a choker that was made in Swaziland, a country that I had visited once. So it was
stunning.
It was stunning for everyone. But I'll tell you, let me jump into that a minute. Then I'll come back to St. Martin. One of the things that saved me and gave me good graces in Curacao, so to speak, is because I entered with the Cabinet Martina 4, and I came in after most of them was already sworn in, because up here they were looking for a minister, and mind you, I was not representing St. Martin. I was asked by Sabre. Mr. Will Johnson called me and asked me to represent Sabre and Stacia. So I came down a bit later, which other people were shocked because they didn't know who. They heard some woman from St. Martin is going to be the minister, but they did not know who. I didn't speak. A lot of people thought it was some other people who are much older than myself at the time. I had two little kids. And so, but one of the things that saved me and gave me good graces in Curacao is very interesting. The Dom Martina cabinet, most of the ministers, or maybe all, I was not there when they got sworn in. You can either, you would see it in court, you can either say, so help me God Almighty, when you take an oath, or you would say, I promise. So, whether you promise not to take bribes and do all kind of bad things that a lot of people do nowadays still. But okay. And I said, no, I'm taking the oath. So help me God Almighty. And from the bishop down to many of the and Curacao, a very strong Catholic population, foundation, that I think helped ease the stress on me in connection with, because they really admired that I was a believer and I was a Christian person who took the oath and so forth and so forth. So they forgive me a bit with a little radical look.
Yeah. So when in Rome, do as the Romans.
So So that's. I cannot say I promise.
Yeah.
I cannot say it. Even when I got sworn in as an interpreter in Amsterdam, I couldn't just say I promise. I really feel much more comfortable and saying because we promise many things that we don't live up to our promise, right? It's like every New Year you have all kind of promises and resolutions, and then at the end you don't do it. But I think if I say, so help me God Almighty, then I'm really making a great effort with the help of God to do the right thing, right?
So with being, Minister, you're Minister of Education, Youth, Sports, and Women Affairs. What was that like, serving in the central government?
That was quite an experience also.
And how long you served just one term? I
served a full term because there was an issue between Sabre and Stacia. Stacia now felt, as a St. Martin woman, I should not represent Stacia. So I didn't even serve one term. But that was quite interesting because it starts from the very beginning. I came to Curacao. With my family. At the time, I just had Ife and Femi, two small kids. And I come at the airport, and I was told that there would be a driver with my car at the airport, and there's nobody. So I take a taxi and went to a hotel, and the next day I take a taxi and went to the Council of Ministers, 40 in Willemstad, and then I heard, but a driver was sent for you, but do you see what happened? The driver had in his head also, not somebody looking like me. He saw me, but I didn't know that was a driver. I saw a guy there stand up and looking around, but they were not looking for somebody looking like me. That's basically it. He turned out to be a very nice person. It would have been good if I told him what I look like, but he's seeing in his eyes a little black girl with braids. That can't be the position, right? But in any case, at a time too, I was the only woman I was the youngest minister and the only woman in that cabinet. And so there have been times I had to lobby with other ministers so I could get things done. Because sometimes it's difficult to fight for things for the Windward Islands, and in particular for Saba and Statia. You know, those two islands have been very
left
much
out. Yeah.
left out. St. Martin too, St. Martin too. I mean, all of the smaller islands have been left out.
Yeah.
Central government was Curacao.
Yeah.
And that they decided everything, and the interest in the smaller
benefit was really our economy. And
remember now, I also came in at a time when Aruba had just left. I came in the first government after Aruba left, right? I have been in meetings where Aruba was still negotiating certain things with the central government, and where Aruba would walk out, and I almost felt like I should walk out too, you know, and because I really felt the small islands have really been getting a bad deal. It never occurred to me before, really, because there was no reason for me to know about all of this before. But at the time now, I got a very good umbrella view of what is happening on the islands and how all of these islands are being neglected. And I used to say in the Council of Ministers at times, it isn't right that a child of Saba or Statia, because it's born on a smaller island, is not getting the same facilities as a child in Curacao. Yes, that is not right. It's not right. And I really used to admire some of the politicians, especially in Saba. I remember Mr. Vernon Hassel, when we were having constitutional discussions and roundtable discussions, and the central government, who was for the most part consisting of Curacao politicians, and then you come again with Curacao, with its own politicians, and not only politicians, but also the whole bunch of experts and specialists.
Advisors
and poor Vernon Hassel would be there, and all the stuff what they all read up and could share up. He had to be doing it on his own and did a great job. I always admired how he did alone. It didn't matter how few people, but that's one little island there. And that was the island which always also had the budget in order, and etc. That one little island there would stand up to this little David against this whole Goliath. Not one Goliath, a bunch of Goliaths. So it was not. It was. But as I said, I got the opportunity to get a good look at really how the powers that be are functioning, and how indeed the smaller islands have been neglected by both the Dutch as well as the central government.
So would you say it definitely was the right decision for us to split apart?
No.
Or could it have worked? Because
it could have worked.
It don't seem like
no.
Because of all the whether it's personalities, but also just the equal sharing up of resources and the collective raising of every individual population.
When I came back, I was very much to keep the Antilles together. I used to remember of a Curacao politician, Wancho Avers, who used to be on the background, one of my advisors, and he used to say 6 minus 1 is 0. So the Antilles was consisting of six islands. And when you take away 1, it's 0. And this is what happened today. 6 minus 1 is 0. Then 6 minus 1, now you have 5. That's exactly what's happening.
Yeah, that was
today.
from Eric Williams.
That Wancho Avers used to say it.
Yeah.
So now, no, I was very much for the Antilles to stay together. Because I thought if we can bring about a change of mentality and to keep the people as one together. Remember, I was born in Aruba. I went to school in Curacao. My family's from here. And so when I come in to visit, I would never go to one island. I used to visit the several islands because,
So it all feel like home.
It all felt like home. I grew up in Aruba. And then, Curacao, I spent years in Curacao. And then here, my family was from here. So it was, it's like, no, I could not agree with that we were going to split up. Although I recognize the neglect of the smaller islands, I think that maybe with understanding how all of this could still work, we could have come out even better than we are right now, today. Today we have a big situation with our budget, for example. Do we really need all of these ministers? Do we really need all of these parliamentarians? Do we really need a minister with 5 people in the cabinet? Or 5 or 6 people? I was the first person who came with one person in the cabinet, and that was someone to accompany me when I go to different meetings, to take notes and to remind me of my appointments. Although there was always somebody who they used to call secretary, but I was more like the telephone operator who would make appointments. And why did I ask to have that person with me? Because when I came into the government in Curacao, all the drawers were empty. There was nothing from which I could work. So if I'm meeting with, for example, the unions, and they would say, we agreed X, Y, and Z with the foreign minister, I don't know because I don't have no document. Everything was gone. Or maybe it was never there. All right? Maybe it was never there, but everything is gone. So I made it a point when I became a minister to have someone with me who would be taking notes and who would be keeping proper filing of the different meetings or the different agreements that I would have made with different stakeholders. And so when I left just with documentation, almost like transfer documents where people could take over from there. Because what I met, I said, this is impossible. How are we running a country like that? This is impossible. You know? And that's one of the reasons why I'm always very concerned about this falling of government, because the continuity is so important.
Yes, indeed. And
smooth
transition.
A smooth transition.
Yeah, because...
and often people do like what is happening with the former president of the United States. They go with everything.
Yeah.
It's so wrong.
Yes,
it's
indeed.
so wrong. It's so unethical. It's so wrong.
Yeah, it's selfish as well.
Yes, it's very selfish.
Yeah. Because, you can... Yes, it has been quite a trajectory in terms of St. Martin's political development. But, when we look back, especially the last 12 years, a common thing you say is, well, every country has grown and it's been through its growth pains, and that is true. But when you have a situation where things can be avoided, and it is a decision that is made to create chaos, you can't pass it off as an excuse.
I know. It has to stop.
It's like, well, every country, some countries exist for over 300 years, and so it's an excuse for St. Martin to have had 10 governments in 10 years because we have to grow as a nation.
No.
But it wasn't a mistake that led to the inconsistency.
No.
It was a choice.
And it's if I'm going to use a big word, it's just whatlessness.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's really and truly, when you look at all of the reasons why the different governments have fallen and so forth, and underhand and kickbacks and wheeling and dealing, it's just whatlessness. Honestly, there's nothing honorable of what have happened, and there's no excuse for having so many different governments in such a short time.
Definitely.
Yeah, there's no excuse.
We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the News Behind the News. Ralph Kintap on Mix 94.7 FM. I'm joined with Dr. Linda Richardson. We, alas, just spoke about basically the lack of stability on St. Martin, and another thing that is often used when I look back on in the last set of years is we say, well, we blame the ship jumpers, but they didn't. The thing is, they didn't jump in the sea and stay there. They jumped another ship.
Yeah.
So we have to broaden that net when we talk about because I will say, you notice that the population has actually dealt with those persons who decided to. They are, I guess, the key peg in creating that instability by leaving one party for another. And there's nothing wrong with that. That measure is there for a reason.
Right.
But obviously we've seen that reason being nothing more than just some sort of personal matter.
Right.
So the ship jumper is one, but also the ship that they then join after, because then you are also complicit in that instability. Right.
No, I fully agree with you, but having sat on the Electoral Council, and have a look at the articles of incorporation of these parties, why was this law put together, the law on registration and finances of political party? One of the reasons was to really create a political party, because what was happening in the past, you don't have no party. When election come, a few days before, suddenly you have a list with a bunch of people on it, and that is then the party. The law was trying to avoid that so that you have a vibrant party.
Correct.
A party with an ideology, and maybe
With a
ideology is too big a word for everybody, but with a party that has everybody looking in the same direction, with the same goals, with the same ideas, etc. Membership, etc. Those parties are not foundations, they are associations. So it means that their membership should supposed to be paying a membership fee. You know that hardly any of those parties have that. Hardly any of them have it. All of them is one big mess. I dare say that now. I'm no longer the Electoral Council, and at my age, I'm making budget this week. I think I could say whatever I want. You understand?
The muzzle is off.
Yeah, because if you had a vibrant, functioning party, you could avoid some of the ship jumping too. Although there are people who don't have any conscience, but you can avoid if you have that everybody looking the same way. But if you never have meetings as a party, you barely have a congress, which you should be having almost every year.
And trainings, seminars.
And training and seminars. Yes, sir? And trainings and seminars and even how to look and how to eat, because some of these people don't even know how to look and how to eat when they go out. Some of them, I heard from some of them, they were slurping in their plate. They don't know how to carry themselves. Okay, so you should have some kind of training on different things, on different aspects, how to behave, how to leadership, and so forth. And those and your party, it doesn't have to be with everybody, but your party has to have that kind of thing every year, all the time. That's a vibrant party. There was a time I was approached in Holland by the late Myrto Cruz, who's a great statesman of Aruba. And he was a member. He had become a member of the Christian Democrat Appel in Holland party, and he invited me because he had wanted me to become a member too. And I used to go to their meetings. I was always amazed. And when I go to their website, they have also special training for women, for example, and so forth. So, what's happening to the parties in St. Martin? They are not vibrant parties. They're not living among the people. When election time comes, they run and pick up a few people, and here we go again, and so forth. And then sometimes you would have to, sometimes when a party leader is going to register the party, maybe the night before, there's already a ship jumper on the other side because something was promised.
Yes, and then you have to scurry and find somebody else.
And choke in somebody else fast.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Well, has no relationship with you or with the other thing, but they get, I don't know. I heard some of them even get cars. I don't know. But fact is, though, that as long as we don't have the parties as vibrant parties, we're going to continue to have an issue. They're talking about electoral reform. The electoral reform start at the party level.
Yes.
Okay? They were worried about electoral reform because of that article where the government, the Prime Minister called for let's fire the
was that article
59.
59, yes.
That's not electoral reform. That could stay.
No.
The electoral reform starts when you start to really properly putting your party together, and don't wait when only there's election to have a congress. I heard one of the party people the other day talking, we can have a congress when we come close to the election. A congress should be held every year. And I know there's a party that's trying to keep up with the Congress, but they're not saying anything in big out there. But a Congress should be held every year. You should check and see. You don't have to every year change your board, but a Congress cannot wait until just before election to decide on what you're deciding on. So I would like to advise all of the parties to go back to your own constitution. I have a saying in Dutch means papier is geduldig, meaning you can write on everything and you can be patient, but you don't carry it out. They have some very good articles of incorporation that they're not sticking with. They're not sticking to. Yes, that. And regrettably, the Electoral Council did not have the means or the authority to look into that and maybe also take sanctions against that. We only could take sanctions against matters related to to the financing part. Because the electoral
reporting.
The law, the ordinance has two pillars. The one with the registration, how you have to register a party, what kind of people have to be on a party, blah, blah, blah. And the other one with the finances,
reporting
how you have reporting the finances.
And individual.
The individual reporting is only during after the elections.
Okay.
But the party itself has to report every year. They have to also give the annual account like any other association, but they have to also report every year what kind of donations they got and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Well, nobody. All them say they never get donations. Even during the election time, you can see some of the biggest lies that they didn't get no donations.
But that's hard to swallow. Exactly, that a party has not received a donation.
Well, sometimes not necessarily the party, but some of the people on the party, will say they didn't get any donations.
Is it possible to make a blind donation, anonymous? If let's say I want to support a political party, would they have to? If I state that I want it to be anonymous, can they register that they receive a check from me, but without my name being published?
The Electoral Council has to know though, and because we also would that should be happening more. Also published the donations issues, etc. However, if it can be that somebody wants to remain anonymous, Electoral Council has to know, because you don't want to get...
For the sake of transparency.
Yeah, you don't want to get a party getting money from strange sources.
Yeah. From the shades.
From the shades.
Yes,
remember, there's a saying in Holland already that in St. Martin, the underworld is entwined with the upper world. And we got to really watch out with that. There are all kind of regulations that say who can give a donation and to how much. So if you are abroad, a company abroad, you cannot just give $10,000 either, So you can't just say, I want to remain anonymous, just like that, because the Electoral Council will still have to know.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, you still have to know. But we will respect the anonymity of the person given, but we need to make sure that it's also according to the other aspects of the law.
Yes. Yeah, because what you're saying, how I look at it is as like this, the party is that leadership machine. Yeah. So, if there is stability in the party, if there is active organization, you can put further trust in that party to further extend what they do within that group for the country. Right. But, and so that is definitely a good perspective you shared, because that is ways in which, we ask ourselves, how can we advance, how can we make progress? Not everything needs to come from an advice from the Netherlands. Like
exactly.
If we just take that initiative.
Exactly. Yeah. You would be surprised, even when one looks at, for example, the annual reports of most of the parties. It is such crap. You wonder, if you have this as your annual report, how can you have run the country? Yeah. Yes, sir. You got to respect yourself. If you have this as your annual report, how can you really run a country?
Because then you ask yourself, what is the motive?
What is the motive? And how are you putting your budget together, really? Yeah. Yes, sir. So it's quite some concerns that many of us have, and some of the older heads with how the country has developed after 10-10-10. I was not in favor of St. Martin going a separate way, because I don't think St. Martin was nowhere near ready. You see, Aruba had different people in different very good key positions in the Netherlands Antillean government. That kind of experience you could build on. We didn't have that. And the reason that I hear some of the politicians sometimes say why we had to do this 10-10-10, because St. Kitts is in the United Nations and St. Kitts don't sit behind a white man. That's nonsense, because how many St. Kittitians are in St. Martin, how many St. Martins are in St. Kitts? That's nonsense. You got to look long term, because you want to be on the front row in the United Nations. Come on, guys. Come on. Is that a reason to drag this country into the pit it has now fallen?
Yeah. And again,
it's selfish.
You just can't carry that excuse that we give. We're learning, we're growing, and not when you make us intent about
You had to
a
be
decision
prepared.
you make
We were not
that
prepared,
doesn't
and you
lift
have to
it.
accept it. And a lot of them will say, "Yeah, but this and no, you were
But
not
the
prepared."
part of the prepared, how I look at it is like we send students abroad for so many things, and if need be, I don't know to what extent there were trainings for areas where we maybe didn't have those offices, because some offices were in Curacao, not here. What sort of trainings and seminars maybe was conducted to provide all people with the skills necessary to continue. Well, how I look at it too, because at that time I was still in high school, so my perspective, with years past, is that while we were in high school, we weren't we weren't even really informed of what this means. So it's it was kind of like while it dragged on throughout the early 2000s, but it was kind of like a snap decision as far as we're just going to do this thing finally, and everybody will catch up.
Right.
But not like a national rally of
rally. Yeah, you see, Aruba had a national rally, and some of it I didn't like how they had bring it over, because it had almost become a little racist. The Arubas against the Curacao and so forth. But they had the people and who were in key positions in the government of the Netherlands Antilles. So you had people who you could have built on, and those people who knew where the arrow was going was grabbing as much as possible to carry back to their country when it was so far. We didn't have people in several key positions in the Netherlands Antilles government, So a lot of stuff had to start from scratch.
Yeah, and I think
then maybe you didn't even have the right connections and networks. That was also necessary to help you build.
Yeah, and I think that is what, in a sense, is a benefit, because it would have continued to be a fight between us and Curacao. So, in a sense, like sometimes, how we are trained to swim, you just thrown in the water. In some cases, being thrown in that deep end, forced us to have to learn to do things on our own. So I think that from that angle, it was necessary. But, of course, again, the main way I look at it is in terms of how have we prepared our people, and did we reach out enough to those who are abroad, to come in and take on the mantle.
Because the next thing what Aruba did, Aruba politicians come up to Holland and decided to check on for example, they needed doctors. They check on which students are studying for doctor, when they're going to finish, and give them some nice perks to come back home. They really went out there to recruit and bring back Aruba, and created also a pride in the Arubans. I remember when I was minister, the leader of the party that started this whole status of party thing in Aruba, he had a car accident on, I think it was New Year's night or so, and was a long-term coma. Eventually he died. So now I am returning to Aruba with the whole council of ministers from Curacao, from the Netherlands Antilles then, and as I arrive at the airport, there's the whole council of ministers of Aruba awaiting us to welcome us that we come to Aruba to the funeral, to the funeral service, and to bid goodbye to Betico Cruz. And many of those ministers, with almost tears in their eye, will also tell me, also accept our sympathy, because don't forget you are also an Aruban. All right? Don't forget you're also an Aruban, so your sympathy too, because you're also an Aruban. And I indeed happen to have been a bit close with that Betico Cruz. He was once head of a labor department. I had just finished some school in Aruba, and I went looking for a job, and he said, no, you didn't get no job. You're too young to go anywhere. You go to continue studying. So, we had a little special bond there. But in even that pride in your country that Aruba had really instilled in the people, and they still have, to move you forward, to really, that I think is lacking here. And pride doesn't mean that you have to be fighting with everybody, because first you're fighting the Curacao people, and now you're fighting the Dutch. That doesn't mean that that doesn't give pride in your country. Pride is not a war. It's just be proud of who you are, yourself, etc. Some of the people who are talking all kind of stuff nowadays, they feel, oh, we are like, almost like a we for we, and we don't want the Dutch, and we don't want that doesn't mean that you have pride in your country, because some of the stuff that we are doing is nothing to be proud about. It's nothing to be proud about.
Definitely. And one of the key things is that you for a long time have been a court interpreter, and I do know that you particularly emphasize the difference in interpretation and translation. So, how was that like? But also, I know that you're training others to take over, because that's something that we do need, and another career avenue for even students now.
Yeah, I am surprised that more kids have not gone out to study to become court interpreters. I
wonder if they're aware that they can.
Yeah, and maybe at the time and for a long time it was not so necessary, and even now I do it on a freelance basis, because actually it's not even good to be interpreting. It's one of the things that I'm also proposing, that you have an interpreter to be interpreting 3 days in a week and every day and hours. It's not even good. In the European Union guidelines, you work 2 hours, you stop, you work 2 hours, and so forth and so on. Mm-hmm. It's overloading the brain, So it could not be necessarily a full-time job, but one may want to do it besides something else. So maybe a good teacher could do this next to, But let me explain indeed the difference between interpreting and translating, because even people who are dealing with interpreters and translators don't really know what is the difference. The translator is a person who could sit behind of a desk with a dictionary, and nowadays you have a lot of very good online dictionaries, and translate a document. So I could it could be any kind of document, from birth certificates to laws, to medical report. Last week I bust my head on a medical report because a totally different language. And so that is you. You're not speaking to nobody. That's just you. Changing written documents in one language and putting them in the other language. That's it, the translator. Could be a translator in, some people are translator for everything. Some people are translator only for, let us say, certificates for the census office. Mm-hmm. Birth certificate, marriage certificate, death certificates, and stuff like that. Only a few of us are considered sworn translators, and only a few of us translations are accepted by the census office. A few of us here in St. Martin. Mm-hmm. Not every translator can or want to be an interpreter, because now the interpreter is the one who will be taking a language that is being spoken and putting it into the other language on the spot. So you don't have the time to be looking in no dictionary. You have the time to be researching. Like last week, as I said, I did a medical report and I had to go into doing some serious research. I have been once contracted by the prosecutor in Bonaire to do an autopsy report. That was a different thing, Wow. That's the translating part. The interpreting part, which could be several types of interpreting too, is that you've got to be speaking all the time. So if you see a document in one language, let's say in the Dutch language, you don't see the document. You hear somebody speaking Dutch, and you translate that for somebody else, for a third party, in English or in Spanish or in Papiamento, whatever language you master. Sometimes you do it what we call consecutive interpreting, and that would mean that somebody could be talking, let us say, for 3 minutes, then they stop, and then you give, you say whatever they said in another language. Mm-hmm. Often at a time with taking some notes, just little scribbles, your own notes, how you're going to do it. There are some notes that you can learn, and then you do that. But you have also simultaneous interpreting, and that is while that one person is speaking, you are translating right away in another language. So while that one person is speaking, you right away you translate in another language. Now with Dutch into any other language is sometimes a bit tricky, because the Dutch has a way of using the past tense at the end of a sentence, whereas in English, like English would say, I have heard Harry say something. And in the Dutch for then, no, I have heard, yesterday I heard Harry, I had heard Harry going to whatever. The Dutch now will say, gisteren heb ik Harry gehoord. So let me just say, that verb comes behind of Harry. So sometimes you have, and especially with the legal things, it takes a while before you can figure out exactly what is the verb in that sentence. So it's not always that easy to do simultaneous interpreting. And then when we have another thing called sight interpreting. And sight interpreting is that you get a document in the Dutch language or whatever language, and you read it up as if it's in another language. And even that is very intense and very difficult. Yeah. Very difficult. Now, these kind of interpreting, especially for the court, I never learned that during my studies. That is something that I gained the skills over the years and working for several law enforcement agencies. I've worked for practically every kind of law enforcement agencies, investigators, sometimes those foreign that come here to and so on. So that is in brief the difference between an interpreter and a translator, and in both categories you have several different types.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I'm glad you share that, especially like you mentioned, white persons, maybe some students maybe haven't gone into this. I really think they don't know, and maybe if they do know, one of the things people wonder, like, how can I make a living off of this?
Right.
But especially in an island like ours, where there's so much languages at play.
I think, and then the next thing is some of the people who are translators don't want to think about going to become interpreters or come in the courthouse to translate, because they rather be comfortable in their own environment and nobody have to see them and hear them and so forth and so on. And some of them, most of the time you got to be, as you know, you've seen me in court. It's not always a very nice environment, and it can be sometimes also very emotional things that are happening and so forth. You really have to, be focused on what you're doing.
So what is it like training people? I know you train a few folks.
Well, I was trying to train some folks before. I was going to be in California. I was going to visit my youngest daughter for almost 2 months. She's now the data science manager of Facebook.
Yeah, Meta now.
What do you call it? Metaverse now?
Yeah, Meta.
Meta?
Yeah.
Whatever. The unreal reality, so whatever. I'm trying to keep up with you all, you young people. But in any case, I would realize that I'm going to be away for a while. And I have been asked before. I must say that the court manager had asked me before to give some courses, not only for court interpreter, but also, for example, for the Dutch judges and court recorders who come, to give them some classes in Caribbean English. Mm-hmm. You understand? I didn't do it. I kept saying, I don't know if I really want to do that, although I have done some of that before. But eventually, I think what is really needed are some court interpreters. So I didn't really advertise. I just asked a few people if they want to do it, and some people had already shown interest. And so I did a sort of a crash course in which I started out, as I just told you, for example, explain first and foremost the difference between interpreting and translating. Mm-hmm. Now, most of those people, they're not translators. Most of them are not. I have the distinct blessing that I could do both. I could be the interpreter, I could be the translator, and then I also have the linguist background, etc. So we did a 6-week crash course. I think it might have been about 60, 70 hours, and then they also have to understudy me. So they come into the courthouse and see how I work. And so we then also throw them out there too. I remember seeing. But they have to continue to practice.
Yes.
Otherwise, you lose it.
Yeah,
you have to continue to practice, and not always it goes as smoothly as I would like it to go, or as people would like it to go. But even with the best of interpreters, not always it goes as smoothly, because sometimes you just, you really first you have to be first and foremost very well rested, and try not to get dragged into whatever's going on in the court.
Yeah.
Because some of these things can be very emotional, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, imagine a mother is there and her son was killed, and and then she hearing what a suspect is saying, and then she breaks down, and it touches you. You are also human. You're also seeing the hurt, the pain of some of the people, and what they're going through, or even sometimes the cruelty in which some of the things happen. You and even though you might have your own opinion about a suspect who you might want to call all kind of names, you still have to remain as focused as possible and just repeat whatever the stakeholder is saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then finally, I know one of the challenges that comes up in our discussion about our laws, meaning Dutch and so forth, is that it's legal Dutch. The Dutch language in a legal sense is very complex and whatever. So, but it is necessary still. Like they have to be translated. People need to, when you have drafts that are motioned, if your population cannot even engage something that will affect their lives, then that in itself is also the democracy
I'm
deficit.
going to give you a scoop just now before I go. I'm going to give you a scoop about myself just now before I go. But let me say something about the laws. The laws are in Dutch, yes, and they are in legal terms, yes. And it's not easy to translate legal terms into another language. Even non-legal terms, it's not always easy. The young lady here is living in Holland. Ask her how she will translate the word gezellig into English. How would you translate that? Lekker een kopje koffie, gezellig. It's bound to the culture. Some things are bound to the culture. Mm-hmm. So you have some legal terms also in the Dutch language that are not easy to translate. For example, the Minister of Justice that we call Minister of Justice here. You don't have a word Minister of Justice in America. There's no Minister of Justice, it's the Attorney General. Mm-hmm. We have a word like that also, right? So you can also say sometimes somebody's the Attorney General here, but that Attorney General is not the same as the Attorney General in America, because the Attorney General in America is the Minister of Justice what we have here. Mm-hmm. So there's several things. So it is true. But legal language anywhere is difficult. So even if a law is in Dutch in Holland, it's not always easy for the Dutch people themselves to understand. Mm. You understand? What has to happen, I think, is that some of the laws have to be simplified a bit. Not necessarily always translating it literally, and I'm not trying to take away nothing from the laws, but even in the Dutch language, the laws are complicated for John Doe.
Yeah, their own folks.
Okay, they have, as a matter of fact, a movement now of some lawyers who are promoting to simplify the Dutch legal language in court cases for the people to better understand what is happening to them. That is what they're calling a fair trial. And I am very much a supporter of that, because again, even in the own Dutch language within the Dutch society, the language of the court is not always that easy.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Especially when they want to sometimes refer back to judgments that were passed by the Supreme Court and what that was and so forth. It's not even easy for the common man. Yeah. It's good cute exercise for the other stakeholders, but and those who have studied law. But for the common man, it's not always that easy.
Yeah. So you can't allow that. Basically, the island's arm is twisted. Yeah, and the masses are held back because of something as minuscule as that. But
since you bring that up, and I have not announced it anywhere, but I'll announce it here, and I didn't want to announce it as yet. But I am because of my work that I did in trying to train court interpreters. I have realized how much I really know about the whole interpreting world, for years. And where the challenges are. And so I decided to put together, based on the course, a book. And the idea was also to start off with the terminology. So what are the terms that are used in a criminal case, or in a criminal proceedings case? And I go from Dutch to English to Spanish, and I have somebody helping me out with French. And somebody said maybe you should do it for the Netherlands Antilles, and I put up a payment to two. I'm going to see. But besides that, what are the competencies that a translator, interpreter needs in the courthouse? What is the relationship that has to be with the courthouse? Why do we continue with simple interrogations and to speak a language that for which you need an interpreter all the time? You know, I know a few of the judges are doing their best now to speak more English, and I applaud that because it brings the court closer to the people.
Yes.
And I'm not saying an interpreter could not be present because maybe you get stuck. And don't forget, St. Martin is such a melting pot of different people. Sometimes today you have a Jamaican, and nobody understands. And sometimes even when the judge wants to he asks what do you mean, because Jamaica, Dominican, etc. We are a big melting pot, and sometimes some of the slangs used, some of the words used, some of the Creole terms used is not always easy for non-St. Martiners or non-Caribbean people to understand.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
That is phenomenal, and that is very much needed.
Yeah, I remember Dutch was had tell me initially, I don't really have to translate, just be there just in case. And this suspect said he was explaining, I didn't greet him. We just booped each other. And so the judge looked at me like, just booped each other, and I'm there trying to think, how would you translate that in? We just booped each other. How would you translate that in Dutch? And then the guy, a young man I know from small too, the guy said, "Oh, he doesn't understand. Okay, let's boop each other." So then we. So you have these kind of situations sometimes that you really can't find the word. You know, how you do boops? How you going? It's afterwards. I think I found a word for it, but it's not always easy to come up with the word, especially when all people want to use, you know, their own slang and this kind of stuff. You know, and young people, you have.
And the slangs they change.
And the slangs they change, exactly. And it also changes depending on which areas and matter you're coming from. If you're coming from Colby, it's different slang than if you're coming from Dutch Quarter.
Indeed. So there's so much more I'd like to get into, but like I said, there definitely will be a part 2.
Okay.
So thank you so much for coming.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Yes, we deviated a bit from where we started, but that's okay.
No, for me, that's okay.
All right.
Yes,
okay.
So
thank you so much for having me.
No problem. To our viewers and listeners, thank you guys as well for tuning in. And be sure to join us again tomorrow. Take care. Join us again tomorrow. Take care. Join us.